Welcome to Hey Listen, where we discuss faith, leadership, and the mission of the church. We're so glad you've joined us. Now to today's episode. All right, we're back talking about pond scum. We are diving into Douglas Axe's Undeniable, his book, and exploring why even the smallest details point to a creator and why that's important.
Yes, and we want to frame this discussion. I know it sounds impractical, but the goal here is very practical. Mm-hmm. And if you go back and listen to our last episode, what we were trying to do is say, if your kids are asking good questions about science, I think we need to have good answers mm-hmm. from our biblical perspective. And we've been saying for a while now, science and faith don't have to be at odds. And so just to throw some pictures back up on the screen, pond scum we're literally talking about mm-hmm. pond scum. So the things that we see on any like stagnant body of water, these particular organisms are cyanobacteria, one of the most common elements in nature. All right. And then the next picture we want to show, just to remind everybody, this is what it looks like on the cellular level. So when we put this under a very, very powerful microscope, we can see that pond scum is green still. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of see the nucleus and you can see the rest of the cell there. But where it really gets interesting is this next picture, because within that cell are all these different protein molecules. And these protein molecules are in long chains of amino acids. And what we see on the left, an unfolded version of that. We talked about this last time in more detail. And basically, when these are folded up, these become three-dimensional. Like on this, it just looks like a flat thing. Sure. But it's actually a ball. It's mm-hmm. a three-dimensional element. So these amino acids, these protein sequences fold up, and then that has a function. It's not just a ball there, but that actually is like, if you can imagine a car, that was one of our illustrations last time. There's very advanced engineering there, and each one of those folded protein sequences has function. It has a job. It is doing work within the cell that is intricate and very finely tuned. And so that's a real brief telling of what we talked about last sure. time. We want to say, okay, we're talking about something simple, pond scum. Oh, wait a second. It's incredibly complicated mm-hmm. when we start looking at the component parts of the cell of a cyanobacteria. And if it is complex and it looks like it has this really creative, clever design, why wouldn't we just assume mm-hmm. that a clever creator mm-hmm. Made it? Yeah. So that's where we are.
Okay. So we're jumping in from that. Where are we going with this? I see a lot of math coming here.
Math is hard.
Yes. We said you're a literacy person. I don't know what I am. I'm a fun person.
Yeah. I think I'm literate most days. When I start reading science stuff, I realize how I am not as literate as I thought I was. But let's talk just a little bit. When we finished last time, we said, okay, the hard sciences, math in particular, that is an objective reality. So even science as we understand it, when you read a scientific journal and theories are being produced, there's a point at which even a scientist says, okay, the data points to this. I'm interpreting the data as such. This is what I think is happening. There's a step of humility there where we say, I have to interpret what I see. Math is a little different. Math is either a math problem, right, is either right or wrong. Right. Okay, mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by objective. In other words, 2 + 2 isn't subjectively, well, I kind of think I like that. Uh-huh. No, it's right. Mm-hmm. Like that is an objective fact.
Yeah, I think that's why some people who are math people are math people.
That's right.
Because it's black and white. It's very clear.
Mm-hmm. It is. So if we're talking math, let's talk for just a minute about probability. And probabilities and statistics is another very complicated. Anybody that's written a dissertation, a PhD dissertation, knows that statistics can be a bear and a nightmare when you're not a math person. But let's talk about go back to those amino acid sequences we talked about. So we can throw the picture up again of the protein sequences, the unfolded one. When we look at this, we can see that there's all these little dots. And, we said before, it's not just 2 different colors. It's really 20 different realities. And honestly, there's these other things that are happening on the outside. That's another element to all of this, where we see some other, I think, even those have purpose, right? There's all these different things that cause it to fold up on itself. These different acids, amino acids, have different functions. It's all complicated, but when that is correct, when it's in its right sequence, in the right sequence, it folds like we see on the right. So here's what Acts says. He says the probability of protein amino acid sequences joining to form functional proteins, which is what we see on the right, the folded, okay?
This is the statistic that just blew my mind.
Is 10 to the 40th power in terms of it happening accidentally. That's a 1 followed by 40 zeros, according to Acts' research. And he says he thinks that that's actually a low number. He says he thinks it's more like 10 to the 74th power.
Which is still so oddly specific.
Well, it is, and they have their reasons for this.
Sure.
But the whole idea here is that when we start looking at the individual pieces and each one being, that's how they get the number is, okay, you have X number of possibilities. So 20 of this arranged in a huge string this long, then all of a sudden we're getting into probabilities that are crazy. I think there's a commercial now where I think Applebee's has this menu where they say there's like 80,000 different combinations because, once you've looked at all the different options you have for your appetizer, all the different for your main course, all the different drinks that you could order, all the different desserts. When you put all that together, you multiply one by the other, by the other, by the other, it's a huge number. You get to like 80,000 different sequences. Okay, so if you use that basic, silly example from Applebee's, that's where you get these probabilities. Because what you're having to do is multiply each one of those falling in the proper sequence at the proper place every single time. That's where you get these numbers are bigger than you can imagine.
Yeah.
Like the mind can't.
Absolutely.
Like even when you start talking about a billion of something, it's really beyond the mind's ability to comprehend.
Yeah.
Like if I say there's 50,000 people in a stadium and I'm sitting in the stadium, I can comprehend that.
Sure.
Because I can look around and I can see 50,000 people. But you can't put a billion of anything in front of you and actually appreciate it. So once you get into the billions and trillions and whatever this is, because it's way bigger than that.
Absolutely.
You realize that these things have come into a perfect place. And I love what Acts says. He says, bricks and breakfasts are made only if someone makes them.
It's simple, but it's a profound statement.
Right, right. A brick seems like a simple thing, and yet someone had to make it.
Yeah.
And then this building we're in right now has tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of bricks. So it built something. And breakfast is the same way. When you sit down to breakfast, if your mother made it, mom can tell you it took some time and energy and effort. My mom makes the best scrambled eggs ever, and I watch her do it, and then I try to do it, and they're not as good as that. And this is something as simple as scrambled eggs. So the evolutionary process, as described by biologists, Act says, is really nothing more than a collection of ongoing blind searches, one for every species in existence. So if you think about it, we're looking at numbers of just crazy probability, and we're really just talking about still pond scum in a sense. And Acts says that for everything you see in the world, there would have to be these things happening in the perfect sequence for everything you see that's alive.
Yeah.
So now we're talking not just if one thing. So this is why when you're seeing the Mars rover and they find something that they think might be, could have been at one time organic, that's why they're going crazy about it. Because anything living, for all the things to happen so that there's life, is insanely, statistically improbable. So that's what we're dealing with here. Now, I'm a Sherlock Holmes kind of guy. All right. I like Sherlock. So think back, if you're a Sherlock Holmes person, deductive reasoning, right? Dr. Watson. That's right. So I was watching the other day, There was a recent, the BBC did the best one with Cumberbatch, is that what his name? Whatever his name, the British guy? Cumberbatch. But Robert Downey Jr., which is a much easier name to say, he did the Sherlock Holmes series. I think there were 2 of them a while back. And there's this great scene where he's trying to explain his method, and he's in a room, in a ballroom, and a lady asks him, "What do you see?" And Sherlock Holmes says, "I see everything." Now, I want you to realize when we're talking about a search, we're talking about evolutionary process. So if the scientists are right and there is no God, it is a blind search. So it isn't Sherlock Holmes who's putting it together. But what we're saying is that all these things fell into place, not deliberately, but randomly. Mm-hmm. So when Sherlock Holmes puts together, when he solves a case, what he's doing is he's putting together a sequence of things. There was a little bit of, he saw dust on a jacket, which made him realize that they had been in a certain part of London, because only that kind of dust would come from that part of London. So again, that's how Sherlock Holmes does things, right? And it's really silly because no one could see all those things or know all those facts. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's like any murder mystery book you've ever read. Someone has to, the detective has to put all of these things together to come up with the who did it. Yeah. So when you play a game of Clue, you're doing the same thing. You're just trying to figure out who did what, where, and with what. Yeah. Okay, well, your mind is doing that. So now imagine all of that happening, what I just described, just in a simple game of Clue, happening randomly. Right, yeah. In the primordial soup. All of these amino acids, 10 to the 74th power if you take Axe's bigger number, or 10 to the 40th power if you take his lower number. All of these things didn't happen because Sherlock Holmes was putting it together, which is crazy enough, improbable enough. Right. But these things all happened randomly. Right. Just by coincidence. Well, it takes a lot of faith to believe that. That's why one person said, "I don't have enough faith to be an atheist." Right. That's what I was just thinking. Yeah. Yes, right. Yes. So again, Axe says the contrasting view is that what looks to be the fruit of genius always is the fruit of genius. So he says, instead of trying to fight the probability, even scientists are going to say these protein molecules, let's go back to pond scum, cyanobacteria, it's genius. They're designed in ingenious ways. A scientist would use that word all day long and say they agree. So what's wrong with saying a genius created something ingenious? Yeah. So I think Axe has the high ground here. He says inventions are clever things, and clever things are to be had only by cleverness. So I think inventors, for instance, if we talk about I'm sitting here under a big light bulb, right? And so the light bulb was invented. It wasn't a blind search, right? But the whole idea there was was Edison, right? He tested all of these different options, right? It wasn't a blind search, but he was using the process. He was right. So when we look at creation, we don't see a blind kind of thing. We see knowledge and wisdom being applied and serving a purpose. I said that. I'm sorry, Colby. I said that a couple episodes back, but we tell our kids God designed you on purpose and for a purpose. And I just keep thinking that with all of this, he didn't design any of this by accident. But you're right. I don't have enough faith to not believe this. Amen. Amen. So I don't know why Axe uses this illustration or why I'm latching onto it. But breakfast, let's go back to breakfast for a minute. And I mentioned earlier something as simple as scrambled eggs. I can't make them as good as my mom. But let's talk about something a little more complicated than just putting an egg in a dish and stirring it and heating it. Let's talk about making an omelet. So Axe basically does this, gives this illustration, so I just want to share it. So let's just think of what it takes to put an omelet together. He says there's at least 12 steps. You open the refrigerator. You pull out the carton of eggs. You open the egg carton. You crack the eggs and put them in a pan. You grate cheese. You cut up sausage, you cut up green pepper, you cut up onion, you turn on stove to a medium heat. You add the ingredients to the egg. You cook till egg is solid and slightly brown. You remove omelet and put it on a plate. Now, I know that's an absurd thing to do, but I wanted to just say, okay, if you made an omelet this morning, you were not thinking about the creative process. You were not thinking about how all those things, if not done in proper sequence, to exactness. Let's say you chopped up the sausage, but you made it too big, okay? Or you turned it on high heat instead of medium heat, and instead of a lightly browned omelet, you have a burnt one. Or maybe you went to the refrigerator and you realized you forgot to purchase eggs at the
That's
store.
what I was thinking. I was like, you have to even have the ingredients to get to this point.
There had to be planning ahead of time to have all those things. So now let's take that. And this is, I think in logic, we call this argumentum absurdum. But anyway, let's take all those things and say, okay, when we're talking about a protein molecule, multiply that by a factor of 10 to the 40th power. All those different things not only had to be in place and that created those amino acids, for instance, the 20 different amino acids, they had to already be there, and then they have to be put in the right sequence, and then they have to function. It's amazing. So just an incredible picture of complexity of knowledge. Now, let's talk about knowledge for just a minute. We know that you give a full refrigerator of food to one person who's a really good cook, and they can create masterpieces. Sure. And you give it to me, and you're going to get mediocre at best. It's true. Let's take it in another direction. Everybody that speaks English is operating with the same basic vocabulary. Now, some vocabularies maybe have 1,000 words, some maybe have 10,000 words, but we all have access to the same words.
Sure.
Okay. And we have some people who can create, like Shakespeare, and just create beautiful, beautiful sentences, words and sentences. And then we have other people who, are never going to get close to that. Their ability to write is just functional. They can give written directions to get from point A to point B. Now, obviously, Shakespeare versus the person who can only write basic directions, we would say, man, there's a universe of difference between those two minds. And yet, just the knowledge of being able to put together, if you think about it, a paragraph on a page, think about all the things that had to happen to make it possible for you to do that.
I think about that even sometimes when I'm just using a pencil and writing and just thinking, I didn't even, I was, I guess, thinking about what I was going to write, but we don't think about every little thing that our hand is doing and the motion
Typing
of that.
Got me in
yes.
That way.
Yes.
I don't think I ever thought of that when I was just writing, but I can remember when I learned how to type and how that is just almost an involuntary thing.
Right.
And, I looked this morning as I'm typing, and I typed 500 words, and it had been about 5 or 6 minutes. And I'm like, holy cow, it's like 100 words a minute.
Yeah.
And I'm not even thinking about it.
Right.
As far as that goes, like the words are, the letters are literally just flying on the page. And I'm not a great typist, and there are people who are much faster than me. But the whole idea there of that creative process and how complex that is, and yet, here it is, we're able to do that. Right. And I just look at what we've been talking about with something like protein molecules and bacteria and things of that nature, and you say, wow, what an amazing thing. Like it's all together. And let's go back to the paragraph. The old saying is, if you put a monkey on a typewriter, if you give him enough time, he could do Shakespeare. It's just improbable. I mean, it really doesn't work.
Sure.
There isn't enough time in the universe to get every one of those characters and sequences in order. It's improbable to the nth degree. And so that's where we start saying, okay, look, there is a world this goes almost back to our very first conversation about science. There is a world that we can look at and we say, wow, that's really complex, but I can see the complexity. I may not be smart enough to understand all the intricacies upon Scum, but I can see that it is intricate. And this kind of brings us to our last illustration and something I want to spend a few minutes on. So Acts says, as scientific achievements help us delve deeper into the atomic universe, we are seeing degrees of complexity far beyond what Darwin could have imagined. We talked about that last time we talked about Pond Scum. So he says this: the sense of having found something that was both meant to be found and cleverly made hard to find points to intentionality on the part of a creator. So let's just unpack that thought for a moment. God wanted to create things for us that were beautiful, that the most simple mind can look at something and say that's beautiful, or I like that. But it's so complicated that it's taken humans thousands of years of mental progress, learning things, scientific achievements, that now at this time in history, we can say, oh, not only is that beautiful, that's clever.
Right. Yeah.
That works on a level of sophistication that is, again, Acts uses the word again and again, mind-boggling. So have you ever taken the kids geocaching? You ever done that?
No, and I don't know why. That is totally up our alley. We should be doing this.
We did that with the kids so back when we first did it a little bit, and my kids maybe don't even remember it because we didn't it wasn't a big deal for years and years. But I remember I thought about buying one of these. You could buy them at like a Best Buy or something, where you would have to buy these. What am I thinking here? What's the word, Colby? To locate something. A GPS. There we go. My goodness, my brain's fried today. So you would buy these little GPS units, and that's how you would find these geocaches. So geocaching is basically, instead of just going on a hike, you're going on a hike, and now we can use our phone, so we don't have to buy these things. We can just use our phone. But we try to find something that was hidden in a clever way. Okay, so he uses the example of the difference between a metal detector and geocaching. So I think metal detecting looks kind of cool too.
Yeah, and that is something we've done. We got Aiden a metal detector, or I think my parents did for Christmas, and it was nothing fancy, but he enjoyed that for a long time before it finally gave out on us.
So I had a friend that did that kind of thing near Civil War battlefields.
Oh, okay.
And he has all of these.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Oh, he has bullets and all these things, and I'm not going to say who it is because it's probably legal to do these things these days. I don't know, but
Oops.
But let's talk about something legal. If you go to the beach with a metal detector, you're looking for things that have been lost. You're looking for things that have been washed up from the ocean, perhaps randomly. Okay, so that is one way to look for stuff, which is to take a metal detector and just go side to side and hope you find something.
Dig in when it beeps, yeah.
Okay. Geocaching is something completely different. Someone has very specifically planted an item somewhere, and you are using your mind and you're using tools to discover something specific. So when it comes right down to it, what science is showing us is that everything that we're finding was placed there with a purpose. In other words, science isn't like the better analogy for science is not that it's like a random search with a metal detector. We're beginning to realize it's more like a very specific search of a geocacher, where now we see that these things are meant to be found, and we are able to more and more put it together and see these sequences. And so what we're finding is, with advanced scientific observations, is that the processes out there are finely tuned and deliberately built to do specific functions. And these things are not made in random ways, but they're made in a clever way, and even hidden to a certain extent.
Right, yeah.
Where it just such a time as this, we have the ability now to find these things and say, okay, in this age of science, we have God smiling at us.
Yes. It's like the deeper we look, we see God's signature on things, you know,
exactly.
An artist who doesn't sign nice and big in the corner, but it's in there somewhere.
It
like,
is. I have said before that the more I've read books like Douglas Axe and you know, we talked about Meyer's book, The God Hypothesis. The more I read about what they're discovering out in space with the new telescopes, what I read about the in terms of the discoveries in molecular biology and quantum physics, it's like everywhere you look, there is this little signature and it says Yahweh was here.
Yes.
And I am so, to me, my faith, I don't want my faith to be based on, well, I have to have all these facts. But I think God knows that the human mind, we're not all Sherlock Holmes, but we're all looking for answers. And we need objective facts sometimes to get us back on track. And I think that the more we study science, I think we can trust that the more we will be able to say, I know my Redeemer liveth, as Job said. I know that God is real. I know that the Genesis story, though very ancient, describes the creation of a world that I recognize and I can study and understand better.
Absolutely. I think this is a good reminder that science doesn't take us away from faith, but really just pushes us to that and that understanding of the Creator. That should get us fired up and excited to keep learning. And
I pray that our people, not only at Ridgecrest, but in other churches, will hear a conversation like this. And again, we've not tried to be scientists or experts. What we're trying to say is be active in your learning. Look for these things. We want our kids to be, we want them to explore and to discover and discern. And we want to be able to have conversations in the world. The gospel is truth. And the gospel is a truth for the world. And it is a truth for the world that was created in very specific and intricate ways. And when we can have conversations about those intricacies and tie them into gospel reality, I think we're better church and better Christians. And so, as much as it seems like we've been nerding out and just, science, that no, this is all about the Great Commission. This is about taking this message into the world. And there's a great mission field out there in our public schools, in our universities. There are opportunities here to challenge the prevailing narrative and say, as I said with Job, I know my Redeemer lives.
Thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Hey Listen.